family. It is your favorite pastry chef coming to you back from Palmira Kitchen. And today we have a very special guest. We're going to be learning how to make sugar cookies for the holidays. And we have none other than Candace Emery from Curated Sugar Cookie Co. She's going to teach you how to decorate your cookies so they are the best cookie at any cookie party.
Hi, I'm Candace Emery, and I'm with the Curated Sugar Co. And I am in Naples, Florida, and I run my own baking business out of my home where I do custom cookie decorating, cakes, cake pops, and other dipped sweet treats. And then I also teach cookie classes where I make cookie decorating accessible to beginners and intermediate levels. And so today I'm going to be teaching you how to decorate really simple Christmas cookies that are beautiful. You can do it in your home. You can use all one cutter if you want. So it makes it really inexpensive and easy to do with your children. So I'm going to show little tips and tricks on how to do each of these cookies so you can do it at home. All right, to start out the cookie decorating process, I wanted to kind of talk about what's in front of me here first and talk a little bit about the icing bags. We're going to talk about a little bit of the difference of consistencies, because you can see here I have two different white icing bags. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the cookies as well. With royal icing, and I'll share a recipe and the link for the royal icing and for the cookies, is the royal icing is basically made out of powdered sugar. It's made out of meringue powder. I use a Wilton meringue powder. I can link that as well. And then it's also, I put a little bit of almond and a little bit of vanilla, both natural flavors, and then water. So that's your main consistency of a royal icing. The difference between the two icings I have in front of me, the one that has a P on it is called a piping consistency, or sometimes in the cookie world, it's called a detailed consistency. And it's the thickest consistency that you're going to pull out of your mixing bowl when you do the recipe and you get it to that stiff peak. That's going to be your piping consistency. And then the flood consistency, which is the other consistency we're working with today, is the only difference between the two is this one has more water. Flood has more water. So piping is used to do like outline around your cookie. It's used for detailing like letters or maybe dots, smaller little components. And flood is to fill that cookie up to cover the whole cookie with icing. So we are going to start practicing just to show you guys how to understand your icing bag, how to hold it, and kind of what you want to see coming out of the bag before we get to our cookies. So with the icing bags, any bags that you buy, you will always have a seam with your bag. So I put a P here that just helps to note the difference between the icing bags in front of me. But to cut a bag, you want to hold that bag away from you and have that seam go straight down the middle And then you want to take your scissors and cut a perpendicular cut to that seam. And you want to start small, because if you cut off too much, you end up with too big of a hole and you can't tape it back on. So start out small. And I've already cut this one because I did some decorating prior to the video. And then we're going to practice actually laying down some lines. This helps you understand kind of the thickness that you're going for when you're wanting to work with detail on your cookies. So to hold your bag, and it can be left or right, it's just mirrored if you're left-handed, but then you want to take that icing bag and lay it in your hand and put it the back of it at your thumb and your pointer finger, and then we want that seam out towards our left if we're right-handed, and wrap our fingers around that seam, and we want all the pressure coming from the back of the bag to the front of the bag so we can manage the pressure of the icing coming out. So what we want out of our royal icing when it's the piping is we want to be able to have a thick enough consistency coming out that we cover this line. And we're about there. We could go a little bit bigger on this hole. But really, when you're piping, you always want to keep the icing between the surface you're working with and the tip of your bag. And the reason for that is you're going to have a nice kind of even thickness to your line, and it's going to be kind of a rounded line. And let me show you, if I drag my tip along the surface, you're going to have a very uneven, very kind of an ugly line. And then you want to have even pressure. So when you're piping, you want to lift up, have even pressure. You want to lift about a half to an inch off your surface and then lay down the line. If you put too much pressure, your line is going to curve. And if you don't have enough pressure, your line is going to snap. So that's just kind of some beginning tips with knowing how to pipe on cookies. Okay, so our first cookie we're going to start out with is this tree cookie. And I'm going to take you through the 2 steps that we go through to get to this design. But first, let me talk about the cookies in front of me real quick. I just wanted to share a little tip. If you are doing sugar cookies and you're finding that your cookies are spreading, that means they're going wider than the cutter that cut them, you can go ahead and put a fork into the middle of your cookies prior to baking, and then it'll help with even baking. So to start out, we need to go ahead and flood this cookie. So with this, I'm only using one consistency for this whole cookie, and that is flood. Otherwise, I would have almost 20 bags we would have to outline and flood with. So here, because the flood does just kind of fall out of the bag, I don't have to put a ton of pressure on it to get that flood to come out of the bag. So we're going to go ahead and outline the perimeter first. And this is the steps you would want to take to go ahead and flood a whole cookie at one time. And then we want to go ahead and squeeze that bag and give it a really thick fill. So we're putting a lot of pressure on the back of the bag. And we are also covering up the naked cookie underneath. We want to cover it up really good. We don't want to have any gaps, because this will allow the flood to really nicely settle and give us that nice even finish. And then I do have a scribe tool, which I can link to as well, that if you do have any gaps, you can drag the scribe tool to fill those gaps. And then you can also put it in the middle of your cookie to shake it to get that icing to settle. Finish out the bottom, the little trunk with brown. Again, you just outline and come in with a stronger pressure to fill in that naked cookie underneath. You don't need to shake the cookie for this small of an area, but you can just kind of move that icing around to get it to settle. So when I'm doing this technique, because we're going to start on the bottom half of the tree, I turn the tree upside down. So what you'll want for this technique is a brush, one that's a little bit rounded on the tip, not straight across cut, so that we can get this technique on the cookie. So you'll want to use your piping consistency, and if your piping is a little dry, you can always have a little bowl of water to dip your brush in and to get your brush a little wet. My piping consistency is wet enough today that I'm not going to need that. So all you want to do is put some dots starting at the bottom of the tree. And then you're going to, about halfway through that dot, put your brush in and drag. And then come on the next row, just kind of starting at the top of where you dragged to on the previous row. I would recommend letting this particular technique and the flood dry probably an hour or two. So if you're doing a bunch, flood all your cookies at once, let them dry about an hour to where you have a really nice crust on it. So that way you don't accidentally indent that flood underneath. I can tell mine's indenting a little. I did overnight dry on the pink cookie you see here, and then I did this actual technique the next morning. Your royal icing cookies need about an 8 to 12 hour dry. So if you do them in the afternoon or at night, just let them dry overnight. Okay, so our next cookie, we are going to do also a wet on wet technique, but this is all done at once. So we flood the cookie, then we add the technique, and then we add our sprinkles. So to show you kind of what I do on most of my custom cookies is I have, like I said, a piping consistency that I outline with. So I'm doing that with this one today. And then we come back in with the white flood. And so this piping actually creates a dam to hold that icing in. And so it allows you to put a little bit more icing to create a real big puff if you want that kind of big puff on your cookies. And it kind of holds it in place, whereas when we outline with the flood too, it can flatten out just a little bit. But still, this really works well. To get to a flood consistency, the amount of water you want to add, you want to start slow with maybe adding about a quarter teaspoon of water into your icing as you mix it up to see if you can get to that flood consistency. And that flood consistency is when you have your icing kind of ribboning off your spatula. Okay, so we've covered the naked cookie. Then we're going to come in with our dark green. You could use whatever color you want. And we're going to start at the bottom here and zigzag across the top in kind of a tree shape. And again, this green is the same consistency as the white underneath it to give us the wet on wet effect. And I do have some runoff, so if you do ever have runoff, you just slide your scribe tool along the side and it'll take care of it. So now that we have this shape, the way we get it to kind of look like a tree is, again, we pull our scribe. We don't go all the way down to the cookie, just through the top of the icing to give that little tree look. And then you can take just regular little sprinkles. They can be multicolored, like for lights, and just sprinkle it on top. And I need to add the bottom of the tree too. Bottom of the tree, again, can also, you can either leave it or you can add just a little bit of a line and a little box. And also this is wet on wet, so it should sink right into that white. And that way it finishes all in one level. All right, so the next cookie we're going to tackle is this cookie that's got 3 different colors. And again, you could just do 2 colors. You could do a white and then a color underneath. I like 3 to give it a little bit more dimension. But as you can see here, we have 4 sections in the cookie plus our trunk. So to do these and to make them stand out a little bit, we want to do this first section and let it crust just a little bit, maybe a minute or 2, and then come back and add the sections in those same increments of time. We're going to do this one in pink, just because I like pink and it's so much fun. All right, so we're going to outline this section with the darker color. And then we're going to come in the bottom and just squeeze a little bit in the bottom. I'm going to come in with the lighter pink, squeeze that, and then come in with the white. Now this is all flood, so this is a technique called wet on wet, where we use all the same consistencies of icing. And with the clean scribe, once those settle, we want to pull that scribe through the bottom to the top. This is my favorite design I'm doing today too. It's just so easy, so fun. And so we let that sit there and dry as we move on to a different cookie. So we're going to go ahead and do the next section of this cookie. And again, you're going to take your darker color, do a little tree shape, come in and fill the bottom, make sure you get all that naked cookie covered. Just a reminder to hold your icing a little, or your bag a little bit above your cookie, so that way you're not dragging your bag through your icing. All right, so I'm going to tamp this down a little bit to get it settled. All right, so now we get to do the fun part and drag the scribe through the icing. All right, this cookie, we're going to go ahead and flood it with the green. We're going to be adding, using the piping consistency, and I'm going to just kind of do like a little bit of a leaf pattern, and then come down a little bit and do just kind of a couple lines out, and then do that all the way down. We're actually going to go back up to the top, and to give it the dimension we see in the example cookie, we're actually going to, I didn't do a very good job there, but we're actually going to kind of do another line over the top of it. Okay, so now, while this is still wet, and be careful picking up your cookie because that flooded area is still trying to crust, so you don't want to accidentally put your finger in it, as we want to sprinkle a list over the top, and then you get your finished cookie on that one.
Palmira members, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you found it helpful. Can't wait for you to try these cookies. They're absolutely delicious, and the decorations are going to make them a big hit for any holiday party that you go to. Thank you, Candace, so much for being our guest today and showing us these beautiful decorations. If you want to get in touch with Candace, I'm going to leave all her information down below so you can place any orders with her. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next video. Bye!